are, as your pastor just said, are gearing up for a bit of a cold spell tonight. When I get home this evening, apparently the temperature is going to be 30 below zero. But I'm ready for that. I have my gloves and my hat that'll get me from the airport to the place where I parked my car, and that's where I have my big and very serious parka. I know that some of you remember this. If not from real-life experience, it's because it's in your DNA as Lutherans. So if some of you find yourselves hunkering down and staying indoors later on today, even though it's sunny California, and putting on heavy sweaters even though it's 74 degrees out, it's because you're Lutheran. You have some Nordic descent in you. There's a Viking in there somewhere. I also want to bring you greetings from Food for the Poor, this organization that I'm here to talk about today. New Hope Church has been a great supporter to Food for the Poor over the years. This morning, there are dozens of other speakers just like me in congregations all over the country of various denominations talking about these programs. We're covering the waterfront because we're pretty sure that when Jesus said, "When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was hungry, you fed me," we're pretty sure he was talking to all of us then. Today's gospel from John doesn't begin like Luke or Matthew do, which you've been hearing for the last few Sundays. It begins with this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And then a few verses later, John's gospel says, "And the Word became flesh and lived among us." What do you suppose that means? Theologians, a lot smarter than I am, have wrestled with those verses over the years, not always agreeing. But this last summer, that first chapter of John took on a new spin for me, that particularly the thought about the Word becoming flesh, and I'm going to tell you about that in just a few minutes. I'm 64 and a half years old. You start counting by halves once you go past 60, I think, just when you're little. I've worked in community ministry most of my life, but I've never really wanted for food or shelter. I was never worried that my kids might suffer or even die from starvation. My family and I have always had a place to stay, clean water to drink, a nice restroom to use. Compared to a lot of people, I've had it pretty good. A couple of thousand years ago, Jesus taught his disciples the most famous prayer of all time, and just towards the beginning of it, he snuck in this phrase, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Do you say that here? Probably every Sunday. I'm not very worried about heaven. I'm sales, that's management. I figure God's got that neck of the woods looked after. But as for God's will being done here on earth, I probably don't need to tell you that there seems to be room for improvement. Disasters are causing all sorts of trouble. Some people are getting so frustrated or unglued they cause great harm in public places. And poverty continues to rear its ugly head. To that, Jesus invites us to pray, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Earth, this place where we live, not just Agoura Hills, not just California or the United States or North America, but all of earth. This business of being God's hands and feet, trying to do God's will on earth, is just enormous. According to the United Nations, there are 7.1 billion people in the world today. 6 billion of us are doing relatively okay, but almost 1 billion of us are in big, big trouble. People like these folks, these folks. Can I have a little button push in the back? There it goes. These folks in Ganthier, Haiti. What are we going to say to them? Eat another cookie? Or we'll pray for you from the comfort of our living rooms? It's just not enough. These suffering people are our brothers and sisters in the faith. We simply can't turn our backs on them. My wife Janice and I have 4 kids. 3 of them are teenagers, so you should pray for us, please. We want our kids to be sensitive not only to their own needs and wants, which they pretty much have been for the last 2 weeks, but also to the needs and wants of kids just like them in Grenada and Panama and Honduras and communities that struggle with poverty right here at home. That's why we as a family support Food for the Poor and other relief agencies. If we didn't, I wouldn't be here asking you to do the same today. I love the way Food for the Poor works. 95% of their donations go to direct service. That's just extraordinary. $95 out of every 100 go to feeding people in these South and Central American countries. The other $5 go to getting people like me around the country to talk to people like you. Food for the Poor got its start in Jamaica. Today, 31 years later, they serve people in 17 countries in Central and South America. The idea is pretty simple. Food for the Poor invites the church in this country to turn its face to the church in these countries, to take some of the wealth from the first world where we live and share it with those in the third world where poverty lives. I was in Haiti last summer in August. It's about 3,000 miles from here as the crow flies. When you fly over that island nation, it looks pretty much like anywhere else, with mountains and rivers and farms and streams, cities and roads. But when you get closer, everything starts to change. It's a busy place, particularly Port-au-Prince, the nation's capital. From the crack of dawn, people are on the move, buying and selling, begging or stealing, working or looking for work, or just walking the streets. It's like a high school when the bell rings and lets kids out of class. As one resident told me, if you don't get out, you won't get anything. Food for the Poor has been there since 1987, offering services of all sorts. There's this feeding station at their headquarters in Port-au-Prince where 15,000 meals are served every day, 6 days a week. 15,000 meals. Can you imagine having that kind of company over for lunch? There's a medical clinic there too, where people such as these receive care, moms and dads and kids who don't have anywhere else to turn to treat their diseases. There's a Little Children of Jesus home for kids who cannot hope to have a better life anywhere other than in a spot like this. It's for mentally and physically disabled young people. It's such a great place. There's absolute joy in these hearts, in the hearts of these children, such as we heard about from Jeremiah. They danced with us. This little girl, with every one of us, all 20 of us, Presbyterians and Methodists and Roman Catholics and Lutherans and Episcopalians. She was having an amazing time. Not far from the Little Children of Jesus home is the Santo Farm, an agricultural and aquacultural lab where people who are indigenous to this country are learning the best ways to raise crops and to raise catfish and tilapia. An hour or so away is the Notre Dame de Lourdes orphanage. That building was put up by Food for the Poor to house kids and occasionally their moms. Most of the moms are prostitutes, and most of the kids are their offspring. The moms who come there have decided they want to get out of that business and into something that would be better for them and for their children. Across the mountains from Port-au-Prince, which is to the south, is Cap Haitian and a community called Shada, which in Creole translates misery. I've never seen anything like this place. There, Food for the Poor has built a school and a feeding station. It doesn't look like much, but that's it. That's where people are fed and young people are taught to read and to write. Education is the way out, everyone agrees. There's work being done all over Central and South America. Microloans are offered to people with good ideas for businesses. Schools are being built or rebuilt after the 2010 earthquake. Homes for the elderly are being constructed, and social workers move about the streets of Port-au-Prince, particularly finding old folks who have no home and no source of support and bringing them into such a wonderful place as that on the lower right. Wells are being dug, and water purification plants, such as the one on the upper left, are constructed so people can have clean water. The water is really the source of most of the disease. Earthquake and hurricane-resistant homes are being built, and fishing boats and motors are offered so people can both eat and sell their fish. What's that old line? Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, and how long does he eat? For a lifetime. I was in Texas a few weeks ago, and a fella told me, teach a man to fish and he'll probably be gone for the weekend. Food for the Poor has partnered with congregations and other allied agencies all over the Caribbean to deliver these things to these people. Almost always the relief is offered through local congregations, which cuts down on waste and loss and expense. Self-sufficiency is always the goal, but it takes time and it takes work, and frankly it takes a lot of money. There are 1 billion people living in poverty out there. That means it's an uphill climb. But to borrow a Lutheran phrase, in, with, and under all of these challenges is hope, a word that I know means a great deal to this congregation. People in these countries, people like these, are forward-looking. They know there can be a better future. They know that self-sufficiency is possible, and they know that they're not alone because of you. I want to make one last stop this morning. Just when I thought that conditions in Port-au-Prince were awful and found them worse in the other coast, in Shada, in Cappadocia, we went to Ganthir, this desperately poor fishing village about an hour west of Port-au-Prince. When we got there, we were swarmed by kids who were asking us for anything we might have to give. I think that they've learned that over time that people on buses have stuff, and they wanted our stuff. They wanted my hat, my sunglasses, my reading glasses, but it was hot there. It was 100 degrees. I tried to explain to them I was from Minnesota. I really needed sunglasses. The hat was kind of important to me. Our visit had been timed. We were there on that particular day for a particular reason, because we had something better than hats and sunglasses. We had food. We had vats of chicken and rice and beans. In a neat and orderly fashion, these villagers lined up, and we fed them. Little children taking great big bowls of rice and beans. They'll never finish all of that food, I said. Our host told me, just watch them. And sure enough, they did. Their little bellies swelling from empty to full, like the gas gauge on our cars when it goes from empty to topped off. These people, you see, get fed only once every 3 days. That's all Food for the Poor can afford, not because of the cost of rice and chicken and beans, but because the delivery system is so complicated. So these people, the kids particularly, gorge themselves to make it last. And in between, they get a cookie. The first chapter of John came to mind when I watched those kids that day. The Word became flesh and lived among us. I wonder, I asked one of my Roman Catholic priest colleagues, do you suppose the body and blood of Christ shows up every once in a while as rice and beans and chicken? I'd love to see the face of Jesus, wouldn't you? That would be nice. In fact, wouldn't it be just great if he would descend tomorrow? Maybe he could start in our nation's capital. But it's unlikely, of course, so we got to do the next best thing. You want to see the face of Jesus? Look at these people, the people of Haiti, Honduras, Guatemala, Grenada, and the rest. I have never seen the face of Jesus more clearly than when I look into the eyes of these people. These folks are 3,000 miles away. Why should you help them? 2 reasons, I think. First, poverty here and poverty in the third world are really quite different. In these countries, there are no food stamps, no welfare, no unemployment, no Medicaid, no public schools where you can get breakfast and lunch. In other words, no safety net. Poverty in the third world is much worse than poverty here. So the right thing to do, I think, is to offer support both at home and far away. If you have $1 to give, spend half of it here and spend the other half there. The good news is Food for the Poor has discovered that when a church gets excited about doing relief work overseas, they also get excited about doing relief work at home. Last night, Pastor Craig told me about the wonderful things you're doing through this church, and particularly how busy it is every day of the week. There's another reason you might want to help, and that's because this church, New Hope Congregation, has known for a long time it's the right thing to do. I looked at your church's webpage last week, and under the section titled About Us, I read this. Let's just read it together. Together, as God's family, we will shine Christ's light and share God's love in our worship, service, outreach, fellowship, caregiving, and justice seeking. We will offer God's living hope in Christ and new hope to those in need. And at the bottom it says, we will build hope together. I know you have done this, and I know you will continue to do this, both at home and far away, so those who are far less fortunate than we might have a little bit better life. What did Jesus say? I was naked and you clothed me. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. When we do that, that is how God's will gets done on earth. So I hope you'll look at the Food for the Poor envelope that's in your bulletin. You can take it out now. It's an insert. Or stop by Food for the Poor's website later today. You can give a gift this morning, or maybe go in with a few friends and buy something big like a house or a boat or a well. You might want to go home and think and pray and talk about it. That's usually what my family does, and send the envelope in later. But don't pray too long, because help really is needed right now. Before I finish, I want you to look at the person to your left or to your right. Now, I know you're Lutherans, and this probably makes you uncomfortable, so you can just look at them out of the corner of your eye. If you're thinking, well, he's generous, he'll give a nice gift, or she's really very kind, she'll write a big check. The trouble is they're thinking the same thing about you. We can't let the people of Haiti and Grenada and Honduras and the rest fall through the crack of our making. We need to help however we can to get this job done. So whatever gift you're thinking of giving, and there are a lot of options, whatever gift you're thinking about giving, I hope you'll think about doubling it. Buy 2 pigs instead of 1. Feed a family for 2 months instead of 1. Buy a whole house instead of a duplex. Because you, like me, are probably really quite fortunate, and we have the power to make an incredible difference in these people's lives. The gospel said, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The children of Ganthir said, can't you give us something? Jesus said, when you cared for the least of these, you became my body in the world. I hope you heard them. So thanks for listening. I will keep you in my prayers as you think about these things. Will you pray with me?